This audio file is a collection made of the summaries of selected articles on August Wilson's Fences. The recordings were made by master's degree students of English literature at Alzahra University for the contemporary drama class of spring 2021.
Hi everyone. The article that I read is titled Father-Son Conflicts and the American Dream in Arthur Miller's Death of a Salesman and August Wilson's Fences. It was written by Emma Watley and published in Penn State University Press. I found in this article, the writer argues that we can find a lot of similarities between the way the fathers, Willie and Troy, treat their sons, Pappy and Biff and Corey, in the two plays, and she tries to analyze the father-son relationship, or more accurately, the conflict these fathers and their sons have in terms of the American dream. And at the same time, she tries to take into account that in Fences, we have characters who are African American, and that is also something that should be considered. While in Arthur Miller's Death of a Salesman, the characters are white, and that is something that makes, as the writer argues, almost all the difference between these two fathers and their sons. So in Fences, we have Troy, who is African American, and he doesn't believe in the American dream, that idea that everyone's free and opportunities are out there for everyone, and everyone, if they just try hard enough, they can become whatever they want and achieve whatever they want. Well, because he's African American, he knows that the American dream is not true when it comes to people who look like him, people who have black skin. So he has been disillusioned, and he is trying to tell his son that in a racist society, there is no such thing as the American dream. There is no such thing as if you try hard enough, you will be successful. So he's trying to push his son in a pragmatic way of surviving. He's trying to tell him that this dream that you have in your head, you're going to be disillusioned because this is a racist society that we live in, and you have to be pragmatic in order to survive. So Troy has had a very negative encounter with the idea of American dream, and he's been disillusioned because he knows that this is a very harsh society. It's a hostile, racist society, and he's just trying to tell his son that the way to live your life is not to believe in that ideal of the American dream, because it doesn't apply to us. We're people of color, we're African Americans, and we have it different. The color of your skin makes you different, and you have to be prepared to live in the kind of society that discriminates against you because of the color of your skin. Personally, I think in this play, the one of the central ideas of the story was how people are limited to the society they were born in, to the family they were born into, and it was just an exploration of how the society shapes you, and how you as a parent, shaped by the society, shape your offspring, your sons, your daughters, how those limits that you had, those traumas, those whatever bad things that happened to you, they change you, and then you pass them on to your offspring. Those bad things, they have a say in how you treat your children, how you raise your children. I think comparing to plays in terms of the conflicts that the fathers and the sons have with each other was a very interesting idea, and it can help us see how race factors as an important thing in how people are raised, how they see the world, and how they make sense of the world around them.
So the article that I read this session is The Failure of the American Dream in August Wilson's Fences by Peymane Baharwand. It mainly discusses the impossibility of the fulfillment of the American dream for African Americans within the play. It suggests that Troy, the protagonist of the play, isn't able to fulfill his dreams of freedom and economic achievement in the environment of oppression by white people who hinder his development. It says that Wilson tries to contextualize black characters in the white-dominated society in order to show that the fulfillment of the American dream remains only a dream for black people in a society in which racism is a great obstacle limiting their achievements. So here, Troy's failure can be associated with the failure of the American dream for black people. As a gifted baseball player, we see that Troy expects to fulfill his promised dream in baseball, but it turns out to be a futile dream. Also, the proponents of the American dream suggest that everyone who works diligently and utilizes his intelligence will have the chance to somehow realize his dreams. But we don't see such a thing happening for Troy in the play. I personally think that this idea is plausible, and one of the circumstances in the play in which it becomes palpable is where Troy and Corey are talking about buying a TV and how everyone has one in their home, but Troy says that he has to be thinking about fixing the roof before thinking of buying a TV. This somehow shows how they are living a life that doesn't meet the standards of the majority of people and also those of the American dream.
Hello everyone, the essay I studied for this session is I Want a Black Director, which is discussed by Michael Awkward. It's the final chapter in an essay collection which is titled May All Your Fences Have Gates, Essays on the Drama of August Wilson, gathered by Alan Nadell. It's originally published in 1993 and you can find it on freelibrary.com. Alan Nadell's edited collection of essays on the plays of August Wilson provides a variety of critical approaches to Wilson's work, one of which I'll be working on is Wilson's own statement, I want a black director for the film version of his play Fences. And Michael Awkward discusses and analyzes this statement. Wilson concludes his remarks that he appeals that only directors of the same racially or ethnically specific group may be qualified to make films whose subject is itself the representation of that group's specific struggles. And Michael Awkward's reaction to this Wilson's statement and his call for a black director takes a very lengthy and complex analysis, and he points out to a variety of issues. He explores the relation of the original text to his film version and the question of whether whites can learn enough to internalize or reproduce features of the complex ethos. Awkward argues and somehow accuses Wilson of possessing outdated notions of African American culture as having a fixed and static view towards it. And Awkward writes, in part because aspects of Black culture have for decades been the topic of sophisticated academic and mass cultural inquiry, often in the work of white scholars, it seems to me impossible to argue convincingly that whites cannot learn enough to internalize or reproduce features of the complex ethos of which Wilson speaks. To prove his point that the means of cultural production do not lie exclusively in the hands of white culture, Awkward points out to Wilson's own mastery of Western dramatic form as a means for the expression of a Black community. In my view, Awkward's essay is, I think, extremely thoughtful and important, and while there is certainly some truth behind Wilson's statement, but I think the Black culture create further distance between these two communities.
Hi everyone. The article I read for this week's play is called Boundaries, Logistics, and Identity, the Property of Metaphor in Fences and Joe Turner's Come and Gone by Alan Nadell. It is a chapter from May All Your Fences Have Gates, Essays on the Drama of August Wilson, edited by Alan Nadell, published by the University of Iowa Press in 1994. This chapter is a thesis on the concept of literal and figurative concepts of personhood and identity in the plays, based on the historical role of the Mason-Dixon line in Black people's sense of humanity. The article defines a fence as a device that, by delimiting a space, signals the existence of property rights. And furthermore, sees naming things as a form of fence building because the unnamed have no properties and claim no rights. So metaphoric fences separate human properties from inhuman ones. The author explains how in antebellum America, race or skin color was one such metaphoric fence that denied Black people the right to humanity and claiming rights. The author refers to two laws, the Dred Scott decision and the Fugitive Slave Law, which saw property law as universal and human rights as local. This specifically meant that slave owners' right to their slaves did not depend on the Mason-Dixon line, and also made the humanity of Black people metaphoric, but their non-humanity a condition of being treated as property. In this way, in Black history, the concept of humanity was a privilege, not a right, a figurative identity beyond a fence that was trampled by the literal inhumane treatment that they suffered. So solidifying identity for Black people can be a conflicted condition that requires explorations of the literal and the figurative. Nadell sees Fences as a work in which August Wilson explores the internalizing of the Mason-Dixon line through the character of Troy Maxon's struggle to build a fence around his home and thus solidifying a space where he is considered human. This can also be seen in his name Maxon, which can be seen as a combination of Dixon and Mason. Similar to his name, Troy himself also embodies the division that the Mason-Dixon line implied for the human rights of Black people. Troy's attempts to establish his control and power within the boundaries of his house is to give himself the power and ownership right that the outside world has denied him. His relationship with his son and his refusal to let him play football is an example of this. We see Troy establish his identity as a father through the different roles he plays in the life of his three children, each 17 years apart in age. Troy's responsibilities as a father to three different generations of Black children shows how he measures up to his identity as a father. While the author of this article sees him in a positive light as, quote, a model of error and a model of correction, unquote, I personally think all three children reveal Troy's failure as a father in three different instances to three different degrees. For his first son, he was unprepared and too young to be a father. To his second son, he is too preoccupied with his own success and failure to give his son a fair chance at his own life. And for his daughter, he's too old and leaves her fatherless when she's just 7 years old. We also see examples of Troy's struggles in the way that he feels about both proud of establishing his household, but also guilty because he thinks that he has relied on Gabriel's money to provide this household, and also in his struggles with death, which seem metaphoric but are also challenging the concept of figurative and literal. Basically, Troy's man-to-man fight with death is a chance for him to transform the figurative into literal by creating this space where it's all his, and so all of the identities that are figurative can become literal. Overall, I thought the concept behind this article was interesting, but the actual content left me rather underwhelmed. I mostly preferred the historical context it provided for the play, but did not find the examples of the theory in the text compelling enough.
Hi everyone. I will be talking about August Wilson and the Anti-Spectacle of Blackness and Disability in Fences and Two Trains Running by Stacey McCormick. It was published by CLA Journal 2017. I found the article on JSTOR. As you can see from the title, this article explores two of Wilson's plays with a focus on the disabled characters. Since we're studying Fences right now, I will only focus on the parts of the article which discuss Gabriel. Wilson actually depicts disabled characters in many of his plays. The playwright himself stated that these characters are, quote, fully integrated into the other characters' lives, but they are a spectacle to the audience, unquote. The fact that Wilson used the word spectacle for these characters is notable because it means that he acknowledged that the audience see these characters through a normative gaze and find them unusual. McCormick, however, argues that anti-spectacle is a better word for these characters. What anti-spectacle refers to is the communication between the audience and the performance of a disabled character. McCormick uses this word in the context of a character like Gabriel as, quote, an enactment of presence that does not conform to the desires or expectations of the viewer, unquote. By the term viewer, McCormick is referring to not only the audience, but also the other characters of the play. Gabriel merges blackness, disability, and criminality. He often appears as a comic relief. Conversely, he is also often arrested for disturbing the peace. From military to the prison system and then the mental institution, Gabriel has been exploited by a system of power most of his life. It is also significant that at the end of the play, Wilson gives the last words to this character. In the play, Gabriel becomes a commodity for the criminal justice system, which takes money from Troy for arresting him. By renting 2 rooms, Gabriel tries to establish a sense of place and protection for himself. He proudly holds up his keys for everyone to see. Owning the keys means that Gabriel is able to lock and unlock his door as he desires, which actually defies class expectations for disabled people. Of course, this sense of control does not last very long for Gabriel. Gabriel's story criticizes institutionalization and subjection. This criticism is actually an important part of the play, and by the end, pretty much all the maxims are discipline in a Foucauldian sense. The rejection of Gabriel is not limited to the world of the play. In fact, Wilson had a conflict with the producer of this play because she was against including Gabriel in the play at all. And of course, the producer was not the only one who had difficulty understanding a narrative that merged being black with disability, and there were many critics who responded with the same kind of confusion to the character of Gabriel. Gabriel defies normal expectations for communication. For Gabriel, howling at the children who tease him is a mode of communication. However, to the police, this mode of communication is a threat. Through this, Gabriel challenges the system of normalcy. In addition to that, he also challenges the structure of power through his song. Gabriel sings about hellhounds in pursuit of the bad man, which is a reference to a blues song by Robert Johnson which dealt with the lynching of the black people. I love this article and I found it quite illuminating. I can also totally see its point about how often when there are disabled characters in a text, those characters are read as metaphors for the themes in the narrative or as facilitators to other characters' growth. We rarely have studies done on these characters as individuals or studies about how their disability affects them.
The article that I read for the play is called Safe at Home, August Wilson's Fences. It is published in the Cambridge Companion to August Wilson, and the writer is Matthew Roisin. First of all, the writer talks about August Wilson and his plays, and then he gives a synopsis of the play. Then he goes on to talk about Troy's character. The writer believes that Troy is not safe and secure at his home. His home has a paradoxical mixture of refuge and tension, shelter and rejection, love and indifference. This home is a place that their son is physically and emotionally evicted, and Troy himself has damaged his marriage through his trespasses. August Wilson himself has said that he likes in his plays a man who has a warrior spirit, a figure that is strong, ambitious, and even if he has suffered injustice, he can precipitate social change. The writer says that there are many similarities between the play Fences and Arthur Miller's Death of a Salesman, how much ever that Wilson himself wanted to resist that. Both plays has the father's infidelities and the father-son tensions. In Fences, Corey wants to play football, but Troy wants him to mend fences, and he wants him to secure a vocational job and not attend college, exactly like Beef Lowman. Beef Lowman saw his father as a fake, and Corey saw Troy as an oppressor. Actually, the fact is, August Wilson believed that the father-son conflict was actually a normal generation conflict that happens all the time. This part is quoted. He believed that such conflicts even are healthy and positive, and Tory's actions was really out of his love for his son. In the scene that Corey and Troy have a fight, Troy accuses Corey that he has the devil in himself, but actually Troy is the one that the devil is in him. The fences actually symbolize separateness, otherness, and inability to communicate with the self and the other. August Wilson says that Troy loves Corey, and many audience can see that, but at the same time we can see resentment, misunderstanding, and ignorance in the relationship between Troy and Corey. The writer of the article also believes that Rose has the most civilizing role in the play. August Wilson ends the play with a kind of affirmation. In the final scene, Wilson offers us a kind of reconciliation, forgiveness, and understanding, and he shows a picture of family unity and love. August Wilson in this play wants us to see Troy as a noble, even heroic figure, and because he's a man who understands the importance of self-reliance and social responsibility. I liked the article and the writer's stance. He has noted many important things in the play, and I kind of agreed with all the things he had to say about this play. I also enjoyed the play very much. Thank you for listening to me.
The article that I chose for today is called Writing Race, Fences by August Wilson. It is published in a book that is a collection of American Studies International Research Conference materials.
And I chose this one because of its title and because I think race is one of the most important factors that shapes the actions of characters. August Wilson himself was an American playwright, and he is the winner of 2 Pulitzer Prizes for drama. And he used to be a struggling writer, and his own family did not approve of him becoming a writer, so we can see traces of his own background in the play Fences. So in this play we have a tragic hero who fails in his own life, but his own failure helps other characters, other Afro-Americans, to change their own fates. We have Troy. He is a 53-year-old man, and he has been working odd jobs, and he has found about his passion for baseball in prison, but it has been too late for him to actually enter National League or any other league because he has been old by the time that he has got out of prison. But he thinks that he is rejected mainly because of his skin color. So we have this dilemma of overlapping kinds of discrimination. So he is from the working class, and he thinks that he has been deprived from a lot of privileges because he has had to work. And I think the importance of this play is that you can see really how different kinds of discrimination and different kinds of oppression come up together in order to just change the lives of people. So the Maxim family are all affected because they are black, but also they are affected by their own decisions and their own choices. The author of this article, Tamar Chishvili, also mentions important symbols such as fences and how they are important. He writes that fence referred to the play's title is an unfinished project. It is not immediately known why Troy wants to build it, but a dramatic monologue in the second act shows how he conceptualizes as an allegory. So he thinks that death can be postponed if he builds that fence, and it can give him a more control on his own life. To Troy, it is enough of an injury that Major League was segregated during his prime. He sees baseball as the best time of his life, but also the death of his dreams and hopes. So he strongly suggests that Corey should forget about his own dreams about becoming a sportsman, and he oppresses his own son. And we have the character of Rose. She is a really faithful woman, and Troy several times shows that and talks about his own love for Rose, but he isn't really willing to give up his own sense of control and his own desire for exotic adventures because of Rose. And that is why the relationship is destroyed. The fact that Rose wants the fence adds meaning to her character because she sees the fences as something positive and necessary. And we also have a friend of Troy. He is called Bono, and he says that I love you both, and he tells Troy to just try to stick with Rose, but Troy refuses. And Troy is rejected and by his family as well as rejecting them, and he just does not make peace with his own 2 sons. His older son is a musician, but he's not respected by Troy, and Corey actually ends up going to military service. So we see that how characters are forced to make choices because of Troy, and we have the character of Rose. She chooses to volunteer and go to church more regularly after she realizes that her hope for making a good husband out of Troy is going to be destroyed, and when she is totally disillusioned by his love, by the fact that he is unfaithful to her. So I think character of Troy is important, although he may not be a really classic protagonist, and I found it really interesting that the play does away with the idea of unity of time, because most of the actions take place in the backyard, but we have really big intervals. We have long intervals sorry, and we come back to the characters after several years have passed. So this is not really a classic play, while it is not trying to just use a lot of devices that are used in modern plays. So all in all, I think the play is trying to give us a picture of several generations of Black people, while it also acknowledges that a lot of those memories are fading away and they are just mixed up with the fancies and the imaginations of older generations, like the stories that Troy makes up. So sorry if my voice is a little incoherent. I just tried to point out the most important things that I found out.
Hello, the article that I'm going to talk about today is titled Baseball as History and Myth in August Wilson's Fences. It was written by Susan Caprens and it was published by St. Louis University in the Journal of African American Review in 2006. It is available on JSTOR. Now, this article argues that baseball is the epitome of all that is good and nice in the American perception. It encapsulates the American dream in all its timeless and democratic glory, and it includes national ideals such as fair play, equal opportunities, the brotherhood of men, and camaraderie. It is an American Eden that is filled with promises of greatness, and the author of this article believes that August Wilson uses both the history and the mythology of baseball to challenge the authenticity of this American dream. Now, through situating the character of Troy within a variety of baseball settings, Wilson contradicts the idea of America as the field of the dreams and draws a very clear picture of what Black baseball days used to look like back in the day, when Black baseball players used to play almost every single day while running short on meals and necessary resting periods. These players also had to grapple with issues of racism and the inability to get into major leagues no matter how hard they tried. And they were considered as second-class citizens in their own country, and strangely they found themselves enjoying the breeze of freedom once they got out of this so-called land of the free. So it's only logical for Wilson to use Troy's experience with baseball leagues to indicate that the American dream remained out of reach for people of African descent. Now, Troy's remarks about there being no such thing as too early to start as a player reflects the hardships that the Black players used to go through greatly. Now, interestingly, the character of Troy is modeled after Wilson's own stepfather, who was named David Bedford, and he was a great baseball player, and after failing to receive a much-deserved scholarship, he killed a man and served 20 years in prison. But Troy in here also resembles all of the individuals who had to stomp on their wishes because there was no route available for them to grow and flourish. The long years of work with no certain outcome to keep Troy satisfied eventually led him to embark an extramarital affair with Alberta, the happiness of which he describes in baseball terms, meaning that baseball still constitutes a huge chunk of his memories. Besides invoking the history of the leagues of baseball in this play, Wilson also makes use of the mythology of baseball as an American Eden to draw the picture of Troy as the farthest entity imaginable from this bliss. The closest Troy actually comes to participating in the idea of American dream is during his life as a member of the Black Leagues. And this American dream, however, has turned into an endless nightmare for Troy. And instead of immense opportunities to grow, he has come to face poverty. He has a lot of responsibilities, and he faces racial discrimination for the longest time. As a 53-year-old man, he struggles as a garbage collector to feed his family and keep going regardless of what might happen. Now, building a fence as a dividing element signifies that Troy cannot reclaim his past glory and that he does not inhabit a walled garden of timeless youth. That's why he defers making the fence for quite a few times. Later in the play, we see Troy preventing his son Corey from playing football. This suggests a form of racial madness, implying that decades of oppression can impact the Black psyche and that decades of oppression can induce a collective psychosis. And this racial madness is also visible in Gabriel, Troy's mentally handicapped brother. The idea of this racial madness is simultaneously interlaced with the failures that two generations have come across in the fields of baseball and football. Now, I think Wilson did a very good job with portraying Troy as a Black man in a white-dominated world, one that wants to conform to the sets of standards that makes him the perfect fit for the American Eden, but at the same time is marked with a distance from all that is considered good and pure. And the author of this article also perfectly pointed this out, and I take side with her. And what I find very disturbing and saddening about matters that have to do with racial discrimination and really all sorts of discrimination is how far deep they can actually hit. And like the ripples of such behaviors hit the individual's self-esteem, curbs their sense of self, and ultimately penetrates the core of what keeps them sane. In most cases, this core is actually family. And in an awful lot of cases, family suffers irreversible transformation, one that actually contributes to the process of alienation of that certain individual. And I think this play displayed this catastrophe masterfully.